Hey everyone, you may remember we did a video last year from the Alhambra in Andalusia, Spain, which is incredible. UNESCO World Heritage Site. We also have done videos from Morelia, where my wife's from, and that too is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And today we've got you the baths at Bath. That is the Roman bath, and that is the stunning cathedral in what is an absolutely stunning town. Just about 100,000 population, and the site of a hot springs which has been in use variously for millennia. The Romans were here around the time of the birth of Christ, and what you see here is actually subsequently been built on top of the Roman baths. But all this stuff down here, this sort of green water, is the original Roman bath. So for example, that down there is original installations, and you can just about see a Roman lead pipe down there, which, I love the Romans, and their ingenuity and their engineering capability is absolutely incredible. I'm sure you may have seen the story of how scientists recently discovered that Roman cement is self-healing for chemical reasons. So lots of super cool things. And the coolest thing here actually is the curses. So here was the baths, the springs, and the Romans used to write little curses on lead little tablets. All of this stuff was discovered at the bottom of the spring because coins, etc., and curses have been thrown into the spring, and all that stuff was discovered subsequently. And what's so sweet about it is a lot of the curses are actually for people who've had their togas or clothes stolen while they were in the baths, which is just awesome. And you can see the curses here, but overall the whole city, and particularly the Roman baths, are absolutely stunning. And as you can see, that cathedral is a double thumbs up. So here we are, and of course it's a calm place to be in extremely turbulent markets. We sort of saw this coming as Trump came out of the gates so aggressively in terms of really what nobody voted for, which was let's go to war with Canada. And that's obviously highly significant because of Canada's importance in energy supply. We had written that not only is Canada our biggest source of imported heavy oil, but also we're quite dependent on it in the north in various states such as New York for electricity. And the conclusion is you can't basically cut off Canada. It'd just be a huge error, especially not if you're trying to lower oil prices and energy prices. But at the same time, you could put on tariffs, but if you did, there's no alternative to the Canadian electricity supply or the Canadian oil, essentially, certainly not in the short term. And so it would be highly inflationary. It would be, well, it'd be inflationary. You can say highly inflationary, I might be overstating it, but it's going to be directly inflationary if you put tariffs on. So the market's sort of zigzagging, and every time it's like, what's the tariffs on, tariffs off type stuff, and we're all exhausted. At the same time, there's a view that Trump is trying to crash the market, essentially. But the risk is that while he could reset the base of the market, which obviously is extremely high coming into his presidency, the risk is he breaks something, and the latest theory is he might just break Tesla, which of course has a rapidly declining share price, which is rapidly declining almost in line with European sales and everything else, because as a consumer product, Elon's involvement, and particularly Elon's wasn't it Nazi salute, has been a disaster in Europe. But also if you look at it, Chinese sales are down 50% for Tesla, and so there are things beginning to break in this tape, and we've got to watch out for that carefully. It could ultimately just be a reset. Now, how do you look at all this stuff that's going on? Well, we're all very bearish here, but of course, that means that there's a risk of significant market rips to the upside, and you just got to be very careful in this tape. You can try day trading it, which is a lot of fun, but you can also lose your shirt pretty quickly. So the first thing with Trump that has been a negative surprise has been the tariffs, and it's not really clear what the end game is, because these tariffs just keep bouncing around, and nobody on Wall Street particularly likes a tariff. We're all pro free market trading, and we've all been taught more or less the principle of comparative advantage, which was written pretty much in the 1700s by Ricardo, which is to say, if I write research in New York and sell it, and my wife's family state of Michoacan grows avocados, it doesn't make any sense for me to try and grow avocados or for them to try and write Wall Street research. What we should do is trade and from that you get comparative advantage. And putting tariffs in to raise avocado prices so that my avocados have a better shot in the market basically doesn't make any sense. So comparative advantage is being threatened, but Trump seems to love the concept of tariffs. And there's definitely areas where we've been out of whack, and the notable one is China. And everything that's going on regarding the US, China, etc., is just causing the market a lot of heartache at the moment, and hence the very high volatility. As for oil, apart from that small issue of Canada being a massive supplier of oil to the US, and therefore the tariffs being negative, this week is CERAWeek in Houston, which is really the biggest executive conference for oil globally. The biggest sort of operational conference is ADIPEC, where I was last year. In fact, that conference was so crowded, I couldn't do one of these videos because it was just so jammed. I couldn't get it right with my somewhat inexplicable commitment to do these things in one take, unedited. And I'll stick with it because it's kind of fun, but be careful, like I can start wandering around. I got ADHD as it is. Anyway, for CERAWeek, the oil guys are totally shocked because we've been waiting for explanation for one of the other big tenets of Trump's policies, such as they are, which is drill, baby, drill. And, how do you manage that if you're talking about, the administration's now talking about $50 oil? You just can't square that circle. And so it was with considerable anticipation that Energy Secretary Chris Wright showed up at CERAWeek, that everyone was saying, okay, how's he going to square the circle? Because he has a high intellectual reputation in terms of being an MIT PhD, I think, but he's certainly got MIT degrees in energy, and so he knows his stuff. And so there's considerable anticipation at CERAWeek for Chris's speech. Additionally, Chris, does have a mixed reputation in the market, the energy market, in terms of previous attempts at IPOs before Liberty Oilfield Services. He had a company called BFDC, which is Best Drilling Company, and that actually failed as an IPO. So it's not all love for Chris in terms of his history of what he's done in energy, but there is a recognition that he gets energy. And he absolutely shocked, and I got CEO feedback, he absolutely shocked the crowd at CERAWeek by basically saying, well, there's going to be bankruptcies. That's the only way that you can get down to 50. And so we're going to go through a 2014 cycle. Now this all rolls back to drill, baby, drill, because if you look at the origin of drill, baby, drill, it was first raised as a Republican policy in 2008. And of course, those of you who know something about US oil will know that in 2008, we were at peak oil, which is to say that the world was convinced that we were running out of oil at that time, and the oil price would have to go a lot higher to meet supply, to make supply meet demand, which was raging, driven by China. And that's when you had drill, baby, drill, which at the time was a great concept if you look back at it, because of course what you needed to do is drill in the US, and what you did is drill in the US. At that time, the US gas revolution, unconventional gas revolution, was already exploding, and of course that would become the US oil revolution. So drill, baby, drill actually was a great strategy that worked. Sarah Palin's idea or not, it wasn't actually Sarah Palin, but she picked it up and made it a huge concept in terms of the presidential debate, vice presidential debate to be precise, when she first stated it, and everyone kind of became aware of this. I think it was around that time she also said she could see Russia from her house. I can't remember, who cares? The bottom line is that drill, baby, drill worked like a charm, because what happened over the past 15 years is that we sure have drilled, and we sure baby, and we sure drilled, or whatever. So the fact of the matter is that US production has absolutely boomed. But then that raised the question of why would you be talking about drill, baby, drill today? Because you already did that. It's a bit like Make America Great Again. It's like, how much greater do you want to be? An example that we showed is that if you look at the poorest US state per capita, which is going to be Mississippi, that's just approaching German levels of per capita wealth. Basically, there's no state in the US that has less per capita income than, for example, the UK. So America's already economically great in terms of personal wealth, which I guess is the best way to measure it. So how are you going to make it great again is another question. And drill, baby, drill, of course, is again, it feels like the horse is in 3 fields away and you're saying, let's open the gate. So that was a problem. But of course, the message that we're going to have bankruptcies, went across pretty poorly at CERAWeek. And the fact that Chris Wright was saying, basically, we're going to have bankruptcies is the reason. So watch out below, because if they're going to push down oil prices, it's going to be very bad for the marginal US E&P. And as a result, there's a very negative sentiment regarding the oils here in the Trump regime, because essentially what they're primarily saying is we're going to bring down oil prices. The other thing to watch very carefully is what Scott Bessent says. We've talked about him before because he's kind of the adult in the room as regards the economy, and he also completely gets markets. And the real attack here is on the 10-year. You know, they're trying to get the long-term treasury down in order to address the U.S. deficit. Firstly, you know, by bringing spending down and everything else down, and also get the 10-year down, and that's going to be a key strategy. And I think, based on what Scott Bessent says, that's their focus. Part of that is bringing down energy prices, and there's going to be collateral damage, which is going to be the oil sector. And we always fear that, you know, ultimately Trump has no great love of the oil sector, nor any desire to see them do well, particularly relative to other things he worries about. He's a New York property guy. He's not a Texas oil man. And so the setup here for those oil guys that voted for Trump is a bit like being a Kentucky bourbon maker. It's like, whoop, that didn't work out for me. So it's a tough environment right here for the oils, and you know, we'll see what happens next. Now, we don't anticipate that the oil market's going to collapse because it's actually pretty much in balance. It's looking like it's weakening. And the real reason it's going to start weakening is probably because the economic impacts of all this uncertainty is going to be pretty negative. And so you're very concerned that the US is heading into recession, and all the volatility is really reducing economic activity, particularly from companies, but also from consumers. And that becomes a significant economic negative, which becomes another negative for oil. So there's a concern that essentially we're going into recession and we're going to try and get even more oil into the market, which essentially is going to come from OPEC plus. And so the shock since I last spoke to you was that OPEC plus announced that they're going to go ahead with increases in production. And that is really at the same price as $73 a barrel around last week when they announced it. It's around the same price as the previous 3 times that they said they would not increase production. So clearly something's changed under Trump. And the Saudis, at least, are listening to his entreaties to produce more oil. The Saudis are in between a rock and a hard place because lower oil prices are a real problem for them. But at the same time, they have to remain engaged with Trump. And at the same time, of course, the other major issue out there is the negotiations are going on in Riyadh between most recently Zelensky and also Putin. And there's another great plot twist here, which is that Trump has suddenly put the pressure back onto Putin, which I wish he would, because I'm really negative on Putin. I think the guy's a psychopath. And as a result, you know, I was pretty disgusted when the J.D. Vance came here to Europe to tell the Europeans that they don't have free speech because you can get arrested for a bad tweet. And then literally in the same trip went and engaged with Putin, who has a track record of, is it called extramural? Of assassinations, basically here in Britain, of political dissidents. And I don't call that free speech, man. It's one thing to arrest someone for a tweet, it's another thing to kill them with poison. And that's the sort of stuff that Putin's been doing. So I'm not a fan of engaging Putin. But having said that, in the last 24 hours, Donald has put the pressure back on Putin. And, you know, I very much support his concept of ending the war because it is futile. I just don't accept the fact that you would end it on Putin's terms and call Zelensky a dictator. Zelensky may have made a bad mistake in the White House Oval Office, but the reality is there's no way he started this war, and there's no way he has the track record, corrupt or not, of, as I say, borderline psychopathic behavior regarding his people in the way that Putin has. I mean, any concept that Putin is, you know, a friend of free speech, it's just like, oh, man, you're wasting my time now. All right, well, that's the whole story. So basically, at CERAWeek, what happened was Wright really upset people, and there was another major plot twist, which was that Scott Sheffield sat down, former CEO of Pioneer, and of course he sold the company to Exxon, and he just blatantly stated that they sold the company to Exxon because they had run out of Tier 1 acreage. So again, that goes to Chris Wright's comments, which is that if the acreage is deteriorating in quality, which it would because of the level of drilling activity, so by extension, you know, you can't have $50 oil because obviously as the acreage deteriorates, it becomes more expensive to drill. And that's just another circle that has been essentially squared by Chris Wright by saying, look, we're going to have bankruptcies in the sector. And so, you know, drill baby drill is, you know, yeah, what he's saying is that as you get more efficient and better doing it, you'll find a way to work at 50, but in the meantime, it's going to be bankruptcies. So as I say, that speech didn't go over too good. And of course, the bulls then point towards Scott Sheffield saying we're running out of Tier 1 is what we're really looking for in terms of the bull case for oil, which is when US production goes negative. A major oil CFO told me, E&P CFO told me that he feels that at $50 oil, within a year, US production will decline 1 million barrels a day, to give you an idea. And that would obviously serve to begin to majorly tighten the oil market, assuming that demand stays up. Demand staying up is very dependent on China, which is under a ton of pressure from Trump. But broadly speaking, sheer global population growth and let's hope continued economic growth globally is essentially maintaining the global oil demand at a high level. We haven't seen the collapses yet, but the key driver of black oil demand, which is going to be distillate, is highly economically sensitive. So if we go into a recession here, we're going to see a reduction in oil demand as a result. And my personal view is we're going into recession. Briefly on the company stuff, BP, more or less everyone now agrees that Elliott has a stake, that what they did at their analyst meeting is insufficient to satisfy the activists, and we'll stay tuned there. The reality of UK stock market rules is that you don't need to necessarily get a board proxy battle going before the annual general meeting for BP, which has been advanced by BP, presumably to avoid that. And normally they would have the meeting later than they are this time, which is going to be in April. You'd have to get your board slate together within probably this week, and that's not happening. But in the UK, you can also call an emergency general meeting for a board vote. And so, we'll see what's going on with Elliott and, whether they're going to foist major change on BP, which more or less everybody wants. At the same time, we're now heading into the Shell analyst meeting in New York, and I'll be heading back to New York. There's the bells of the cathedral. That cathedral is beautiful, man. And this place, the Roma Bus, is awesome. So we're going into the Shell analyst meeting with, Wael Sawan, who has, a good reputation, not the usual Dutch bureaucrat or British bureaucrat running Shell. He's actually ethnic Lebanese Canadian, and we'll see, but he's got a high reputation. We'll see what he comes out with at the meeting, but he's got essentially a more radical plan, I think, at the outset than BP does. And broadly speaking, because you're getting into a situation where Europe is having to spend more money on defense, and they've acted quickly to do that, you're actually into a model where European government spending is rising, whilst our friend Elon at Doge is trying to cut US government spending. So suddenly what's happening is the European markets are ripping kind of on inflation and government spending, and the US market's collapsing on disinflation, deflation, and cutting government spending, because so much of what's happened in markets over the past 5 years has simply been inflation and insane government spending. So whilst the Europeans historically have been more conservative in their spending, particularly on defense, now you've got a major rotation and you want to watch out for that. Okay, last couple of things. We did a big note on Chevron at Tengiz. That's their major mega product. Can you have a major mega product? What am I talking about? A major startup mega project, which is in Kazakhstan. I've actually visited there. It's absolutely in the middle of nowhere. And it's an incredible achievement by Chevron to have developed that asset, because it's just so challenging. It's a field that was discovered, they say, by cosmonauts from space, to give you an idea how big it is. And Chevron's going to take production from the field constrained to 1 million barrels a day. So it's a remarkable oil field. The only problem is it's in the middle of nowhere. And there's been issues with labor and costs and everything else associated with it. But now we're through the capex phase and into the production growth phase. And that's a very bullish time to buy an oil company. So you'll see Chevron's production rising rapidly. And we tend to assume that OPEC Plus and the need for Kazakhstan to show production discipline will tend to be applied to Kashagan and Karachaganak, the other major projects in Kazakhstan, because the economics and contract structure of Chevron's Tengiz are superior for the government economics than they are for the other two projects, which have cost recovery and have cost more or less out of control. So our anticipation is we'll see a situation where Chevron's Tengiz is less cut back than the other projects in Kazakhstan as Kazakhstan tries to meet its OPEC quota. The plot twist there is that we had thought that Russia might mess with the volumes there, because the pipeline that takes the volumes away from Kazakhstan go through the CPC pipeline through Russia into Novorossiysk, the Russian port on the Black Sea, which has been in the headlines because of the war. And what we thought was that maybe Russia would mess with Tengiz because market power and asserting some situation against the US. But of course, since Trump came in and more or less appeased Putin, again keeping in mind that in the past 24 hours he's now putting Putin under pressure, we were worried that there could be some messing with the pipeline by Putin. But what's actually happened is that Ukraine has now started attacking the pipeline by taking out with drones, taking out a pump station. That pump station has been bypassed, but that was a new twist. Broadly speaking, everything seems to be heading towards a ceasefire from an exhausted couple of countries, God bless them, Ukraine and Russia. And, that will then cause concern in another collapsing market, which is European gas. It's actually pretty chilly here, but broadly speaking, the potential for peace, Russia-Ukraine, is really causing some downside in European gas prices. And at the same time, over in the US, we've also had, lively gas prices, let's say, but a concern that there's too much LNG in the world now. That's the latest concern amongst clients, because as the Qataris grow LNG supply and the US grows LNG supply, there's worries that you're going to have too much LNG over the next 5 years. So watch that one. But broadly speaking, gas remains a favored place to be by everyone, and oil remains a concern, particularly amongst more levered E&Ps, because you don't want to go into a situation of $50 oil with high leverage. And quite a few of these oil companies, US E&Ps, really have too much leverage, given that we've been in a pretty good oil price environment for the past 5 years. Some of the companies, such as EOG, come through with actually negative net debt. That puts them in a brilliant position. Others, Chevron, Exxon, have very low net debt. By contrast, someone like BP has even higher net debt than appears on your screen because of accounting issues in terms of how they account debt. And then you have names, that are more extreme. Devon is around the level of BP, broadly speaking. And then some of the more levered names are a major concern in terms of how much debt they have in US E&P land. Okay, I think that'll do it. Into a recession, refining doesn't look good. And of course, the AI theme, as we have predicted and hope, just keeps coming like a steam train. And that, that theme is been somewhat sold off, because some of the more highly valued companies that are a big play on AI have sold off hard, led by NVIDIA. But the reality is the spending will just keep coming, and so the gas to AI theme remains strong, and we've been going on about that for a while. I think that'll do it. Let's just quickly show you some of the stuff. So these, I think the statues I think are Roman, because the stuff that's built on top is not Roman, it's all subsequent developments. But really an amazing place, and a pleasure and a privilege to be here, and a pleasure and a privilege to speak to you, Alex. You've got to have your energy, man.